The peaceful silence of the galaxy was shattered by a sudden and unexplained event. On the outskirts of the Arcturian space sector, deep in the vast expanse of the stars, the radar systems aboard the flagship Svetra blinked red, signaling an anomaly. Commander Drix, the experienced and battle-hardened leader of the Arcturian fleet, glanced at the display with a furrowed brow. The radar was picking up something that should not be there. A massive ship, unlike anything they had ever seen, was on their sensors. But what made it truly terrifying was not just the size of the ship, it was the complete lack of identification. The Arcturians had encountered many ships over the years, but this one was different. There were no known signatures, no response to the standard communication frequencies. It was as if it came from nowhere, appearing on their radar without warning. Increased the sensitivity of all scanners. Commander Drix ordered sharply. His voice was calm, but his mind was racing. This wasn't just an ordinary ship. It was something unknown, something that posed a serious threat to their security. The crew worked quickly to get more data, but the results were troubling. There were no signals coming from the ship, no communications, no indication of its purpose. Yet it was large, far larger than any Arcturian warship, with a design that seemed oddly advanced, even for a galaxy already filled with powerful fleets. Could it be the humans? Captain Sura, one of Drix's trusted officers, asked cautiously. The thought of humans, the so-called wild card of the galaxy, made Drix's stomach tighten. The humans had been quiet for years, staying mostly on their own, but their technology was a well-kept secret. What if this was a new weapon they had developed? Drix didn't respond immediately. He stood there, staring at the radar, his mind calculating the possibilities. The Arcturians had long dominated the galaxy. Few races could challenge them, but humanity. They were unpredictable. Their potential was still a mystery, and the rumors of their advanced technology had always remained just that, rumors. Prepare a message, Drix said after a long pause. Let's see if they respond. I want to know what we're dealing with. The communication officers quickly scrambled to send a signal, using the most secure and universal channels. They waited, tense silence filling the room, but there was nothing. Not a peep from the mysterious warship. Still no response. The communications officer reported, his voice laced with uncertainty. Drix stared at the screen, his fingers tapping on the console, his mind working through the worst-case scenarios. Prepare the fleet for full alert. We won't take any chances. The galaxy was not a place for mistakes. For all their intelligence, the Arcturians had never seen a ship like this. They had to assume the worst. The unknown warship, whether human or something else entirely, could be the beginning of something far more dangerous. As the Arcturian fleet powered up its weapons and shields, a growing sense of unease settled over the crew. This was more than a routine mission. It was the beginning of a mystery that could change the galaxy forever. The question remained, what did this ship want? And, more importantly, what would happen if they couldn't figure it out in time? The days that followed the appearance of the mysterious warship were filled with tension. Commander Drix paced back and forth on the bridge of the Svetra, his eyes never leaving the screen. The ship was still there, just outside their reach, sitting in the dark void of space like a shadow that refused to be chased away. It remained silent, its weapons idle, its hull dark. There was no movement, no indication that it was anything but a ghost ship. Report, Drix snapped, his voice sharp with impatience. Captain Sura looked up from her console, her face tense. No change, Commander. The ship is still in the same position. Our attempts to make contact have failed. There's no response to any of our signals. The silence was deafening. Every crew member on the Svetra felt it, an unease that settled like a thick fog in the air. No one could remember a time when they had been this uncertain. The Arcturian fleet was one of the most advanced in the galaxy, but this unknown ship, this human warship, if the rumors were true, was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Drix clenched his fists, trying to keep his calm. The uncertainty was gnawing at him. "Are there any other ships nearby?" he asked. "None, Commander. It's just us and them," Syrah replied. Her voice trembled slightly, despite her attempts to keep it steady. "Then why isn't it moving?" Drix muttered. "What are they waiting for?" Suddenly, the ship's radar emitted a faint ping, a small disturbance in the system. The crew jumped, but it was just a small blip on the scanner, not much more than a ripple in the vastness of space. "Could be a malfunction," Syrah suggested, but her tone lacked conviction. Everyone knew it wasn't a glitch. It was something far worse, something that felt too deliberate. Drix's mind raced. The warship was still out there, and it had to have a purpose. Whether it was a peaceful mission or an invasion, he couldn't say, but the longer it remained silent, the more dangerous it became. A ship of that size, human or not, had no reason to be in this part of space without a clear objective. Was it a test, a show of force, or was it simply waiting for the right moment to strike? At that moment, a new message appeared on the main screen, the message code flashing across the screen in a strange, unfamiliar pattern. It was clear, though. It was from the human ship. "Finally," Drix murmured, a glimmer of hope lighting his features. He ordered the message to be decrypted, his fingers crossed. The words that appeared, however, were cryptic and chilling. The message read, "The galaxy has forgotten the price of peace. The reckoning is near. Stand aside or be swept away." The crew fell silent as the words hung in the air like an omen. Captain Syrah exchanged a look with Drix, her eyes wide. "Is this a threat, Commander?" Drix's expression hardened. "It's not just a threat. It's a warning." The room was thick with tension now. The galaxy had known peace for too long, and now, this human warship, whether by design or by sheer power, had shown them that the cost of peace could be much higher than they ever imagined. Drix knew that they couldn't afford to ignore the message. He had to make a decision quickly, but the options were slim. The fleet wasn't ready for a full-scale war. Their only hope was to find out more about the humans' intentions before they were caught in the crossfire. "We need to prepare for the worst," Drix said, his voice resolute. "But we also need to find out what this warship really wants. No more delays. No more silence." The crew began to scramble, moving swiftly to prepare the fleet for whatever lay ahead. As the message from the human warship flickered on the screen, one thing became clear. This was not going to be an easy confrontation. The galaxy was in danger, and the Arcturian fleet would have to act before it was too late. The silence that had once hung over the galaxy now felt like an unbearable weight. The message from the mysterious human warship, cryptic and chilling, had left the galaxy's most powerful fleets in a state of deep uncertainty. What was humanity's true intention? The message could mean anything: a call for peace or a declaration of war. The galaxy's greatest minds had been left spinning in confusion. But Commander Drix knew one thing for certain: waiting for the human warship to make the next move could cost them everything. The longer the silence stretched, the more dangerous the unknown became. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. The Arcturians were formidable, but this human warship was like nothing they had ever faced before. Drix knew that if the galaxy was to survive, they needed to act fast. The galaxy's council of leaders, representatives from every major race and species in the sector, was convened. A shaky alliance had been formed in response to the threat, with the Arcturians leading the charge. The humans had made it clear they were not just a peaceful species, and the galaxy needed to prepare for whatever came next. The council meeting was tense, each race eyeing the others with suspicion. "We must make contact," General Para of the Velen race said, her voice unwavering. The Velen were known for their tactical genius, and her reputation was enough to make every leader listen carefully. "But we cannot trust them completely. We need to show strength, not fear." Drix nodded, acknowledging the general's wisdom. "I agree, General Para. But if we strike first, we risk provoking them. The human warship is far more advanced than anything we've ever encountered. A direct attack could be disastrous." The discussions were fierce and full of doubt. There were those who wanted to strike first, believing that showing fear would make them appear weak. Others, however, insisted on patience, urging the council to send ambassadors and offer peace talks. But every leader understood that peace was an illusion when facing an unknown enemy. It was at this moment that the voice of the human fleet finally broke the tension. Commander Cade's message was brief, but it reverberated across the council chamber like a shockwave. We are here not to conquer, but to protect. The galaxy is in danger. We will help, but only on our terms. The words hung in the air. Protect. It didn't make sense. For centuries, the galaxy had been united in peace. The idea of humans, who had been quiet and isolated for so long, suddenly stepping in as protectors was hard to comprehend. Was this a bluff, or was there truth behind Cade's words? Drix felt the weight of the decision pressing on him. I've seen their warship up close, he said, his voice steady. The technology is beyond anything we've ever seen. If they truly want to help, we should at least consider their offer. But we must also prepare ourselves for what might be a trap. General Para leaned forward, her sharp eyes never leaving Drix's face. And if it's not a trap? She asked. What if humanity is truly offering us a chance to fight back against something even more dangerous than them? Drix hesitated. It was a terrifying thought. What if the human fleet had seen something they hadn't? A greater threat lurking beyond the edges of the galaxy. We can't afford to take that risk, Drix finally said. We'll accept their terms, but we'll watch them carefully. If they try anything, we'll strike back first. The council agreed to send an emissary, a small fleet of trusted diplomats, to negotiate with the humans. If they could prove their intentions, the galaxy would have to listen. But even as Drix made this decision, he couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was already too far down a path of no return. As the emissary fleet was dispatched, Drix couldn't help but wonder, were they really making the right choice? Could humanity truly be the savior of the galaxy, or would they be the ones who led them all to ruin? The galaxy's uneasy alliance had begun, but even as the emissary fleet set course for the human warship, a new and far more immediate threat loomed on the horizon. It was a name that sent chills through the hearts of every galactic leader. The Fallen. The Fallen were an ancient race, long thought extinct. Legends spoke of their ruthless conquests, their unstoppable war machines, and their relentless hunger for control. Once, they had nearly destroyed entire star systems before they vanished into the dark corners of the galaxy. Few believed they still existed, and fewer still had ever encountered them. But now, something had stirred them from their slumber. The attack came without warning. A massive fleet, dark and haunting, emerged from the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Their ships were ancient, yet formidable. Their weapons were built for destruction, and their tactics were brutal. They had waited, hidden in the dark corners of space, until the perfect moment to strike. That moment had come. The first signs of the Fallen's return were seen when several peaceful colonies in the Outer Rim went silent, their communication systems suddenly cut off. A handful of ships sent to investigate vanished without a trace, their last known coordinates vanishing as if swallowed by the void. And then the reports came in. The Fallen had attacked. Commander Drix received the news on the bridge of the Svetra, his expression grim as he listened to the transmission. The Fallen had begun their assault on the smaller colonies, but their reach was already expanding. Entire star systems were falling. The attacks were swift, merciless, and deadly. General Para, what's our status? Drix asked, his voice steady but laced with concern. We've received reports from several systems, Para replied. The Fallen ships are unlike anything we've ever seen. Our fleets are struggling to defend, and the loss of life is unimaginable. Drix clenched his fists. The situation was growing worse by the minute. His thoughts turned to the human warship still on the radar, sitting silent and distant. It was still there, a reminder of the unknown, of the cryptic message that had left the galaxy in a state of panic. He couldn't shake the feeling that the appearance of the humans wasn't a coincidence. Could the Fallen be behind this sudden threat? Captain Sura asked, her voice trembling slightly. Drix shook his head. The Fallen have always been a separate danger, but they've never struck so suddenly, so calculated. Something is driving them, something we don't understand. As the news of the Fallen's attack spread, panic set in. The galaxy's leaders convened in emergency meetings, scrambling to figure out how to respond. It became clear that no single species could fight the Fallen alone. But would the human warship help? Or was it waiting for the galaxy to weaken further? Drix had to make a choice: to continue with the fragile alliance and send the emissary fleet to the humans for answers, or to focus all efforts on stopping the Fallen. And then, just as the Arcturian fleet was preparing to mobilize for defense, a new transmission came through. This time, it was from the human warship. "Commander Drix." Commander Cade's voice echoed through the comms, calm but firm. "You are not alone. We have seen the Fallen's return. We've already taken action. Prepare your fleet. Together, we can stop them." The message was clear. The humans weren't just observers. They had already begun fighting back against the Fallen. But why hadn't they communicated sooner? Why had they waited until the galaxy was on the brink of destruction? A decision had to be made, and it had to be made quickly. The galaxy needed unity now more than ever, but there were still so many unanswered questions. Was humanity truly an ally, or was there something far more dangerous lurking beneath their seemingly helpful intentions? The galaxy was at a crossroads. With the sudden reappearance of the Fallen, who were systematically obliterating colonies and systems, the fragile alliances that had just begun to form seemed to falter. As Commander Drix's fleet prepared for battle against this unstoppable force, the message from the human warship rang in his ears. "We have seen the Fallen's return. We've already taken action. Prepare your fleet. Together, we can stop them." But the uncertainty still lingered. Could the humans truly be trusted? Were they working to protect the galaxy, or were they merely seeking to further their own unknown agendas? Commander Drix stood at the command center of the Spectra, his fingers dancing over the controls as the Arcturian fleet readied itself for an impending war with the Fallen. But even as they prepared, he couldn't shake the question: what role do the humans play in all of this? The human warship, still looming in the distance, was a mystery. It had remained silent for so long. And yet, here they were, sending a message offering help when the galaxy's need was greatest. Drix's instincts told him not to trust them completely. Their technology was far beyond anything the Arcturians had, and their sudden involvement in galactic affairs was too much of a coincidence. "I want every system on full alert," Drix ordered. "We're not just fighting the Fallen. We're fighting to hold the galaxy together. The humans may help, but we will not depend on them." Captain Sura, standing at his side, nodded grimly. "Understood, Commander. The fleet is ready, but the longer we wait, the more systems will fall." Drix's gaze shifted to the view screen, where the massive human warship remained stationary in the distance, casting a long shadow over their preparations. The Fallen were wreaking havoc on the outer colonies, and if something wasn't done soon, the entire sector could fall. He clenched his fists. There was no time for hesitation. The emissary fleet had already left to meet with the humans, and their reports were due any minute. But the situation was dire, and Drix knew that he couldn't afford to wait for answers. The Fallen were already too close to the heart of the galaxy. As if on cue, the bridge doors slid open, and a tense officer rushed in, holding a fresh transmission. It was from the human fleet. Drix's heart raced as the message began to appear on the screen. "Commander Drix," came the familiar voice of Commander Cade. "We've located a Fallen flagship. It's not far from your position. We can gauge them. We're requesting your fleet's immediate support." The message was direct and filled with urgency, but it wasn't just a call for help. It was a demonstration of the humans' power. They had already located the Fallen flagship. Their fleets were fighting in the distance, and they had managed to track down the enemy before the galaxy's forces had even gathered. Drix's mind raced. Were the humans truly working to protect them, or were they trying to manipulate the situation to their advantage? The answer would have to come soon. Drix could no longer afford to second-guess his next move. The Fallen were a threat that no one could face alone. "Prepare the fleet for immediate deployment," Drix commanded, his voice hard. "If the humans can lead us to the Fallen, we'll fight with them. But I want full control of the situation. We can't let them gain too much influence over the galaxy." The fleet began to move into position, the immense ships of the Arcturian and allied fleets slowly aligning for battle. Commander Drix had made his decision. If the humans were allies, so be it. But if they had ulterior motives, he would be ready. This would be a war like no other, a war not just for survival, but for control over the future of the galaxy itself. As the Svetra and its allies moved toward the battlefield, a strange sense of unease washed over Drix. The humans were powerful, but he knew their full capabilities remained hidden. Could they be trusted in the long run, or were they just biding their time, waiting for the right moment to strike? The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Every move, every decision made in the coming hours could change the course of the universe forever. The void of space shimmered with the glow of distant stars as the combined fleet of the galaxy's might approached the Fallen flagship. Ships of all kinds, massive Arcturian dreadnoughts, sleek Velen warcraft, and even the mysterious human warship, lined up in formation, preparing for the most important battle the galaxy had ever faced. Commander Drix stood on the bridge of the Svetra, his hands tightly gripping the command console. His mind was racing. There was something haunting about this moment. The Fallen fleet loomed large in front of them, dark, ominous, and seemingly endless. It wasn't just their ships that were terrifying. It was the sheer destructive power they held. These were the same creatures who had nearly wiped out entire star systems centuries ago. The galaxy's fragile peace was about to be tested in a way no one had ever imagined. "Commander Drix," Captain Sira's voice broke through his thoughts. "We've received the signal from the human fleet. They're ready to engage." Drix looked toward the view screen. The human warship had positioned itself at the front of the formation, its massive hull gleaming like an unknown beast waiting to pounce. The ship was unlike anything Drix had ever seen, even in the legends of ancient weapons. The humans had kept their power hidden for so long, but now it was on full display. "We move in together," Drix ordered, trying to mask the unease gnawing at him. "We can't let the Fallen breach our lines. If we wait, we lose everything." As the fleet advanced, Drix's heart pounded. He could feel the weight of responsibility bearing down on him. If this battle went wrong, it could mean the end of everything. The galaxy's greatest minds were focused on one single target: the Fallen flagship, a giant war machine that dwarfed even the combined might of their fleets. But despite their overwhelming numbers, the odds were still stacked against them. The Fallen ship opened fire first, unleashing a barrage of weapons so powerful it shook the very fabric of space. A thunderous ripple spread through the fleet as the Arcturian ships retaliated. Energy blasts filled the air, but they seemed to have little effect on the Fallen's armor. It was clear the Fallen were ready for war, and they would not be stopped easily. "Shields at full power," Drix shouted as explosions rocked the Svetra. "Return fire," ordered General Para, her voice filled with urgency. The Arcturian fleet began firing, but the Fallen ships moved with an eerie precision, evading their blasts with terrifying ease. The Fallen were not just powerful. They were strategic, ruthless, and terrifyingly efficient. It was at this moment that the human warship made its move. Without warning, the massive ship surged forward, its engines flaring to life with a power no one had expected. The human ships, hidden for so long, finally revealed their true capabilities. They weren't just another fleet. They were a force unto themselves. Massive energy beams shot from the warship, piercing through the Fallen lines with precision. "We've found their weakness," Captain Sira shouted. "Their shields are vulnerable on the underside." The human warship continued its barrage, its cannons firing relentlessly at the fallen flagship. But even as the human fleet's weapons tore through the Fallen's defenses, something was wrong. The fallen flagship had begun to glow, a strange, ominous energy building up inside its core. "It's a trap," Drix shouted, his mind racing. "They're charging their main weapon." The fallen flagship unleashed its counterattack with unimaginable force. A beam of dark energy shot out, tearing through the galaxy's combined fleet like a hot knife through butter. Ships exploded into bright flashes of light, their shields no match for the devastating attack. The blast tore through the front lines of the Alliance, and Drix watched in horror as the Arcturian dreadnoughts were obliterated in the blink of an eye. The galaxy's entire alliance was on the verge of collapse. But then, something unexpected happened. The human warship, now heavily damaged but not destroyed, moved into position directly beneath the fallen flagship. Drix watched in shock as the ship released a powerful energy pulse, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The pulse sent a wave of shock through the battlefield, momentarily stunning the fallen flagship's systems. Drix wasted no time. "Now, attack. All ships, focus fire on the fallen flagship." The combined fleet fired everything they had left. The human ships unleashed another devastating barrage, followed by the relentless Arcturian strikes. Together, the Alliance began to overwhelm the fallen ship's defenses. The fallen flagship began to shake violently. It was clear that their enemies were starting to realize they had underestimated the combined might of the galaxy's forces. But even as the flagship began to crumble, Drix knew the danger wasn't over. The Fallen had more ships hidden in the depths of space, and this was just the beginning. The battle raged on, but something inside Drix had changed. The humans, despite the questions about their true motives, had proven themselves in battle. They had held their ground and delivered a crushing blow to the Fallen. Perhaps they were not the threat he had feared after all. Perhaps humanity was the galaxy's last hope. But as the Fallen flagship finally fell, Drix's thoughts turned to the future. The galaxy was safe, for now, but the war was far from over. And there was still one crucial question left unanswered. What would humanity do next? The dust of battle had barely settled. The debris from the fallen flagship drifted in space, its dark remains slowly dissipating in the vacuum. The galaxy had just witnessed the collapse of one of the most feared forces in history, but the cost had been staggering. Dozens of ships had been lost, many lives had been sacrificed, and still, the galaxy was on the edge of collapse. Commander Drix stood on the bridge of the Svetra, his eyes fixed on the aftermath. He was exhausted, mentally, physically, but there was something deeper weighing on his mind. The humans had helped, yes, but in the back of his mind, there was still uncertainty. The humans had come out of nowhere, wielding technology far beyond what any species in the galaxy had ever imagined. They had fought valiantly, yes, but what would their next move be? "Commander," Captain Sira's voice brought him back to reality. "The humans are requesting a meeting." Drix turned to her, his eyes narrowing. "What do they want?" "They've sent us a transmission. They say they have vital information about the future of the galaxy and the Fallen's true objective." Drix hesitated. His instincts told him to be cautious. Humanity had shown its strength, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized the humans might not be here just to help. They could have their own agenda, one that had yet to be revealed. But could he afford to turn them away? The Fallen had been a catastrophic threat, but they weren't the only danger out there. The galaxy was fragile, and the last thing it needed was to alienate any potential allies. "Set up the meeting," Drix said, his voice steady. "I'll hear them out." The transmission came through, and there on the screen appeared Commander Cade, the leader of the human warship. He looked weary, but there was a fire in his eyes. "Commander Drix," Cade began, his tone serious. "The battle is won, but this is far from over. The Fallen were only the beginning. We've seen the signals. They've been gathering strength for years, preparing for something even bigger. We intercepted their final message before their flagship was destroyed. It wasn't just an attack. It was a signal. Drix leaned forward, his interest piqued. A signal. Yes, Kate replied. A signal to someone. Or something. Much worse. The Fallen were merely a pawn in a much larger game. And now we're facing the real threat. The words hit Drix like a thunderbolt. The Fallen had been a pawn. Who or what could be worse than the destructive force they had just faced? What exactly are you saying, Commander? Drix asked, his voice tense. Cade's eyes darkened. The Fallen's true masters are preparing to invade, but they won't come alone. They have allies, terrifying ones, and if we don't unite now, we won't survive the next wave. Drix's mind raced. He had thought the Fallen were the galaxy's biggest threat, but now this revelation changed everything. The galaxy's survival was hanging by a thread, and the question now wasn't just about defeating the Fallen. It was about preparing for a war unlike any the universe had ever seen. How can we stop them? Drix asked, his voice urgent. We can't do it alone, Cade replied. The human warship and our fleets are ready. But this battle requires the strength of every species in the galaxy. We need a full alliance, one that's not just temporary. We need a new order, one where we stand together, united. Otherwise, we'll be wiped out before we can even fight back. The room fell silent as Drix processed the gravity of Cade's words. A new order. Unity. The galaxy had never been unified before. Species had always been at odds, vying for power, and for the first time, Drix realized the truth. The galaxy's survival hinged not just on defeating the Fallen or any single enemy. It rested on cooperation, on a united front that could resist any invader, no matter how powerful. The question now wasn't if the galaxy would survive, but how. Drix stood, facing the view screen. His mind was made up. The galaxy could no longer afford division. It was time for them to come together, to set aside old grudges, and to form something new, something stronger. The threat of the Fallen was just a taste of what was coming. And if they were to survive, it would take every species in the galaxy working together. Commander Cade, Drix said, his voice resolute. We'll unite. We'll form the alliance you've suggested. The galaxy's future depends on it. And humanity, you're no longer a stranger to us. Welcome to the future of the galaxy. Cade's face softened, a look of quiet approval in his eyes. Thank you, Commander. Together, we'll ensure this galaxy stands, no matter what comes. And as the transmission ended, Drix felt something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. For the first time, the galaxy wasn't just on the brink of destruction. It was on the brink of something new, something greater. The war with the Fallen had ended, but the war for the galaxy's future had just begun.